name's Mervin Tibay. I'm a land development engineer. I've been asked by Engineering New Zealand to answer a few questions to assist you graduates transitioning into the workforce out of study. Firstly, for me, I think it's very important that you have to remove yourself from the job that you're applying for. What I mean by that is, like, you don't take it personally, and you don't hold on to not getting the job that you want. I actually applied for multiple jobs as a graduate once I got out, and I didn't get the ones that I thought I would get, actually. It's not necessarily all about your qualifications, because at the end of it, it's like there's people in my company that went from land surveying to land development, or they went from planning into another field, which was then engineering, or they're team leaders that are from different disciplines that are leading engineering teams or doing project management. So I take the approach that, what you've learned in university might not always be what you practice. I wouldn't take it personally. I just kind of consider it's a moment of time that you're going for a job, an employment, and at any moment, an opportunity will always arise. So for me, I don't hold on to any of my failures, really, like from not getting the job interview. I always just take them as learning experiences. Like, one of the key things that I learned having a conversation with one of my friends, she was actually going for a job, and then she didn't get the job. So there are two ways about going about that. Well, instead of saying what was wrong with me, or there was the idea of like immediate blame and just absolute hatred for the guy who didn't hire you, or you look to think, oh, there's something wrong with me. Instead, she just said, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to go in the investigation of why I didn't get the job. How do I get better at this, or why didn't they do this? And then that way, it's like, well, you're fixing things then. So every interview that I go to and I fail, it's like you're just improving. It's just practice. You're just getting better and better. Well, the better you understand your marketplace or how your business operates, the more defined and the better you understand how whatever your service that you're providing will have an impact, or what's the marketable skill that you can actually deliver that someone will want. Because you got to remember, as engineers, we're still subject to the market. From my experience when working with Auckland Transport, I had to really develop my listening ability as an engineer. Like, sure, there'd be a technical design aspect of being an engineer, and then what I don't think a lot of people realize is there's also a communication aspect of being an engineer. So when I was working for Auckland Transport, understanding the wider business of dealing with clients, it was important that you had to develop the listening ability to be able to listen to people's concerns. You have to communicate on every aspect of like what the scope is, what key deliverables are. So that's one of the things that I've learned. The second thing is, like, as engineers, we deliver a product in the end of the day, a service or a product. So, like, understanding how our business, our charge out rate, or how something is financially structured to support the business and also give value to the customer. Now, how do I improve that service? How do I make that workload more efficient? Or how do I pass on savings to the client? Like, it's just always like understanding how the business is dictated by the market, and the marketplace has a demand. That's always made me question, what are the things that I've got to do that'll make it so that people want to come to me, or how do I improve the product, the service, or the experience of what we're delivering that can be given out to the client who will want to come back for more. Although we solve problems, we've got to be able to sell or market what our abilities are. And I think as engineers, we poorly market our skills and abilities. Like, we're fantastic when it comes down to design and stuff, but when it comes down to communicating and marketing ourselves, like, if we were good at it, we wouldn't have a marketing team. So in summary, from my experience working with AT, learn how to listen to people, listen to people's concerns. You can identify that concern, you can then solve the problem. And a lot of the times it's not a big problem, it's just like a minor concern that can be like, I just looked that up and then I'll just email you a standard, or let's just address that. It's not as big as you think it is. On top of that, as an engineer, it's made me always think highly, like, we've got to revise our quality. What can we be doing better here? Like, how can we be more efficient? How can we manage this better so we can deliver to the client better results? Because at the end of the day, the client's gonna, they have to, there's something that they want to achieve, and you're providing a service that competes with everyone else. So if your service is great, and if you're constantly QAing, which is quality assuring or quality controlling, the better the service, the better the client will likely come back to you. A typical day for me is come into the office, read a lot of emails. As I said, it's a lot of, like, you have to always be on the top of your communication, and you also have to be able to respond to communication quickly. Answering emails, looking at designs, reviewing designs, looking at a lot of standards. Like, if you're in land development, you're going to love the Auckland Council website, the design manuals, Auckland Transport design manuals. A lot of my day is also undertaken by a lot of AutoCAD and 12D. So if you graduates are wanting to learn a program, like, I highly recommend you use like AutoCAD or BricsCAD. Yeah, so it's also reviewing designs by other consultants, looking at our designs, doing a bit of drafting, well, actually quite a bit of drafting, and also communicating back and forth with your clients. I'm always in constant communication with them. If something happens to a design, you've got to quickly be able to send out an email or pick up a phone and be like, hey, something's changed here. We moved a tree. We've got to move the stormwater line. Is this power line going to help you out, or do we have to move that? So that would be quite a big chunk of the day, which is also looking at how to communicate with your clients. The other thing that I would usually do is look at design on your design package. So we use 12D. There's also Civil 3D is a other design package. It's also just designing changes to those to the models that we have. Also, there's also a big chunk was training. So as engineers, obviously we've got to continuously train and update ourselves. And so what I usually do on some days when Engineering New Zealand has, I usually look at a webinar and record it down to CPD. So a solid piece of advice for you guys who are starting out, like, don't be lazy like me. You want to start racking up your CPD points, because eventually you're going to go become a CPeng. So CPeng is Chartered Professional Engineer, and I'd highly recommend, like, you either keep an Excel sheet of something, even if you're just like interim graduate, I'd like write down like what you did today, or even get it from your timesheet and prove that you've been learning along the way. And even if you don't do that, like for your CPeng, but do it for yourself. Like, I think it's important. Like, you're showing that you have engineering competencies. So when you see that Engineering New Zealand has a free webinar, I highly recommend you go see if you can actually just join in. Get the value out of those. The other portions of my day is like communicating with team members. So there's going to be a lot of times where you don't know stuff. The beauty of being a graduate, and I used to just call this the graduate thing, is you just simply admit you're a graduate. You just go up to someone and just say, I'm a graduate, I don't know, I gotta ask you a question. So I'd highly recommend, like, people who are starting out, who are just graduates, do that. Just ask heaps of questions. And I still ask heaps of questions, but you guys have more of a grace period, which is great. The other part of my day is, like, we have to go to meetings, so client meetings, and also team management meetings. And then obviously have lunch, and then 3 o'clock biscuits. Take short breaks, because if you're doing long periods of engineering, you got to take those short breaks. And then at the end of the day, a lot of Q&A. Q&A is like, man, you got to do a lot of quality assurance, and you got to always be looking at reviewing standards and keeping yourself up to date. Also reviewing other people's work, and like for me, I try and get as much I try and get as much guidance from a senior engineer. Like any seniors, like as much as I can learn from a senior, the better. The more time I can spend with a senior, that's like highly valuable. I think it's important, work-life balance. Although there are times where you're going to have to actually work longer periods of time, longer periods, because certain projects will demand it. It's best you have to look after yourself. I think it's just important that you're surrounded by people who are in the same discipline as you. So with the young engineers, it helps me because there's a different perspective of it. Like I've only been in engineering for 6 years now, and already I can feel like, man, it's becoming cementing to me that there's got to be one way. This is the one way that has to be done. And having young engineers, it's kind of like you guys have all of these fresh ideas, or you're working on these other projects that I've never heard of, and you've got more of approaches to it. It's kind of like you don't want to get stuck in your own way, and when you're with young engineers, it's kind of like they'll ask you questions that you might not even know or even considered. There's always that benefit of being around young engineers. It's kind of like, well, you're kind of reinvigorated because you've got either the enthusiasm there, just fresh ideas, or there's a different way of thinking that you've never thought of. Like when you start working in an industry, I think what happens is eventually you work there long enough, you get tunnel visioned, and then it's like, well, young engineers will come in and it's like, well, they'll have a new approach, and something that you've never thought of might become the solution. Also, I think it's just important to just train and mentor. It maintains the quality of engineers, like senior engineers looking after young engineers, because then the level of engineering just continues, and hopefully I think it'll eventually just continue going up with the more technology we have. And I think there's a mentoring process to it. It's you have to give back, because at the end of the day, we all started out as graduates. Connecting with young engineers it just continuously expands your knowledge of engineering. It reinforces what you really know if you can actually teach something. And I just like to see that I'm contributing back to the younger engineering generation that will eventually replace my generation.